The Javelin class destroyer is a colossal capital ship, slated to feature in both Star Citizen and the Squadron 42 single-player experience. This big, tough warfighter not only looks foreboding, but may also carry the armament to back that up with heavy firepower. I'm Forrester, and welcome to the Drydock, a new series which will delve deeper into the ships of Star Citizen. This video will explore the background behind the Javelin both in and out of game, then take a look at some of the attributes and statistics of the ship before considering how that might all translate into gameplay. There are timestamps in the video description, although if you're a fan of the Javelin, you might prefer to watch this one all the way through. And whilst this channel usually focuses on what's currently in-game, necessarily this video will navigate that treacherous space that is speculation territory. Whilst every effort has been made to approach this video accurately, sometimes information is sparse and much is subject to change as time goes along. So please treat the content with a pinch of salt and not as a definitive promise as to what will happen. All of that said, let's dive into the background of the Javelin class destroyer. The Javelin was first formally announced in November 2014, although a destroyer type ship had been accepted onto the roadmap as a stretch goal before that point. The concept was for a modular capital ship that could fulfill a number of different purposes, as well as having a hangar bay as the basis for some missions in the Squadron 42 campaign. The initial design had the Javelin come in at 345 meters in length, but the ship has subsequently grown beyond that to the current 480 meter length. During the holiday livestream in 2015, a short video of some of the internal layout was shown, followed a couple of years later in April 2017 by an Around the Verse ship shape special featuring the Javelin. Some of this work has clearly changed as time goes on, but equally much of it will be familiar to those with an up-to-date knowledge of the ship, suggesting that the Javelin has an identity that survives these updates. In May 2020, the Invictus launch week offered players the first opportunity to see the Javelin in a flight-ready form in-game, followed by the Xenothreat the following year, which showed the Javelin in a combat scenario. Shortly thereafter, in May 2021, the Invictus launch week offered players a limited tour aboard the UEES Warhammer, an active service Javelin class destroyer, which featured in the Xenothreat event, and subsequently this tour has been available annually for players. In the Star Citizen universe, the Javelin is a fairly old ship. Development began in 2685 with the aim of building a modern destroyer that was fast, but armed in a similar fashion to the cruisers and battleships of the time. Moreover, the design called for the ability to fit out the destroyer to undertake different roles, depending on the needs of the mission. With an accelerated design, development and construction scheme, the first 5 operational Javelin-class destroyers were commissioned in 2690, establishing the UEE Navy's 8th Destroyer Squadron. First blood for the Javelin was in 2692, absolutely dominating a Vandal Raider squadron over a 15-minute engagement, with the Javelin emerging relatively unscathed. The first operational improvements were made 100 years later in what would become known as the Flight 2 Javelin. Whereas Flight 1 models took several days to refit to meet different mission requirements, the Flight 2 redesign made improvements to the interior that allowed for much more rapid refits and, critically, in the field without the need for a specialist shipyard. The Flight 2 production started in 2790, concluding in 2820 before the models started to be retired in 2915. The most current version of the Javelin class is the Flight 3, which was a major upgrade to the combat capability of the destroyer, reworking the shield system and introducing point defense cannons. Production of the Flight 3 model started in 2820 and remains current, with the oldest designs only recently starting to be retired. Traditionally, ships of the Javelin class are named after weapons, such as the Flisser, which met a sad end on Daymar, and the Warhammer. That's a somewhat abridged history of the Javelin. For those interested in finding out more, I'd highly recommend watching Astro Historian, a great resource for all sorts of Star Citizen lore content, but particularly his video Aegis Javelin Destroyer, Humanity's Bulwark. For the first sales in 2014, the Javelin cost an astounding $2,500, making it the most expensive Star Citizen ship sold at the time. There were a limited number of hulls available, all of which sold out. Through subsequent limited hull sales, the price crept up to $3,000 or $2,700 for war bond purchases of entirely new money. That makes the Javelin the single most expensive ship in Star Citizen, although there are even more expensive packs for big spenders. The Javelin is also granted to a very small number of players through the referral program, with 2017 successful referrals granting the recruiter this major warship. At $40 per referral, that's a total cost of over $80,000 for a referral Javelin, and accordingly it's a benefit mostly attributable to large-scale content creators. The 2951 Whitley's Guide to the Javelin identified 6 primary design roles that the destroyer was expected to perform. The first is Fleet and Commerce Escort, with the Javelin acting as a self-contained entity to run escort to convoys, or in a group to escort larger capital ships like battleships or carriers. The second is as a convoy raider, to strike out at vulnerable supply routes or to engage similarly sized warships. The third is reconnaissance in force, being strong enough to penetrate enemy territory and find out what's going on, but being much cheaper to replace than larger warships if something went wrong. The fourth is command and control, with the facilities on board to organise a small battle group or operate as a search and rescue hub. The fifth is planetary bombardment, which is less ominous than it sounds, focusing instead on dealing damage to specific planetary targets or space-based installations. And the final is as an armoured transport, as a relatively tough nut to crack, making the Javelin a comparatively safe place to house a VIP or valuable cargo. Based on current information, the Javelin would have a total length of 480 meters, a total width or beam of 198 meters, and a total height or depth of 72 meters. For context, that's more than twice the length of the 890 jump yacht. The Javelin is set to have a total mass of some 109,860 metric tons. As a capital ship, and one of the largest available to players, the Javelin is expected to house a considerable number of components. It's set to feature a capital-sized radar and 8 medium-sized computers. The Javelin is powered by 4 capital-sized power plants which provide energy to the ship. Cooling is provided by a combination of 4 capital-sized coolers and 8 medium coolers. And the Javelin also carries 4 capital-sized shield generators and 4 large shield generators for coverage across the ship. By way of maneuver support, the Javelin is slated to include a capital-sized quantum fuel tank and 2 capital-sized hydrogen fuel tanks. The quantum drive and jump drive are both said to be capital-sized, and additionally, the technical overview lists 2 capital-sized fuel intakes to feed the requirements for the ship. In terms of propulsion, the technical overview notes that the Javelin has 14 main thrusters, 4 retro thrusters, and 20 maneuvering thrusters located around the ship to provide rotation and translation support. The placement of the main engines seem to be in a mixed configuration of smaller Idris-style nacelles, located 2 at the front and 8 at the back, and then 4 heavier, more Javelin-style engines at the back in a diamond formation. The Javelin comes armed with 2 forms of heavy armament. The first is a set of heavy anti-ship cannons on 2 remote turrets located at the back of the destroyer, 1 dorsal and 1 ventral. These look to be 2 size 8 or size 9 cannons on each turret, potentially packing big firepower. The other heavy armament is a set of 2 size 12 torpedo tubes right at the front of the ship. With a total battery of up to 32 torpedoes, these missiles are larger than anything else yet announced, dwarfing the seemingly paltry size 9 weapons on the Eclipse and Retaliator, and larger than the size 10 set to feature on the Polaris. The Javelin is further bristled with a combination of turrets designed to deal with smaller targets. There are 7 manned turrets armed with 2 size 7 weapons each, 3 located on the underbelly of the Javelin and 4 on the bow. There are another 6 manned turrets, forming a broadside of 3 running down each side of the top of the ship, and these turrets also carry 2 size 7 weapons, but have a secondary fire mode with 2 size 4 weapons to deal with faster targets. Currently, the size 7 weapons all seem to be bearing M9A laser cannons, and the size 4 weapons are Apocalypse Arms Revenant ballistic Gatling guns, although that's all subject to change. Some of the launch materials suggest that the military specification weaponry may be removed on civilian models, creating an upgrade path for players. The specifications point to a minimum crew of 12 up to a maximum crew of 80 persons aboard. Just filling the turrets and having a pilot would require 15 people, and that's before other ship positions like engineers, medical teams and other bridge crew are filled. There may be some possibility of using NPCs to support this, although it's important to point out that the launch materials for the Javelin are very clear that the Javelin is a ship intended for group play. And for the Squadron 42 campaign, it's likely that the Javelin will operate much closer to the 80-person crew maximum stated to help fill out the large space and make the ship feel a bit more alive. As a fully kitted out warship, the Javelin class destroyer is equipped with all manner of useful features. Players can expect to find state-of-the-art medical facilities, as well as an armory and brig for the more combat-minded. There's a large cargo bay at the back, which is noted in the design specifications as 5,400 SCU, although judging by the dimensions of the ship, following the cargo refactor, this might be a somewhat lower cargo capacity. Up top, there's a hangar bay which should accommodate a pretty reasonably sized ship, potentially including a Redeemer. And some of the materials suggest that there may be an Argo MPUV bay too, although this is contradicted in others. Nevertheless, the Javelin does come bundled with an Argo MPUV cargo variant. Finally, the Javelin specifications list a number of modular rooms that in lore are swapped out depending on the mission at hand. Much has been made of what these possibilities might include, but at time of writing there is little information as to how this would actually work. Naturally, there are other rooms that are there to show that this is a habitable warship, things like the captain and XO quarters, briefing room, mess hall and the like, that may not add as much utility to player gameplay. The Javelin is stated to be a versatile capital ship, and accordingly could have a lot of potential use cases for players. It's also discussed in many of the materials that the ship is likely to be prohibitively expensive to operate, so may remain a rare sight out in the verse. One potential use case is as a self-contained mobile platform, able to take a significant group of players on an outing, supported by the strong offensive and defensive capabilities of the ship, and augmented by the quality of life features like bed logout and the medical facilities for mobile respawn. Whilst the Javelin is a destroyer, it's not a stretch to imagine it taking the role of a traditional cruiser in modern parlance, able to operate away from base for extended periods, looking after itself and its crew without a need to rely on other ships. From a combat perspective, it's easy to imagine a fully crewed player Javelin having a big impact on events like Xenothreat or the Arlington Idris, and being pretty fun for all of those involved. In a lot of descriptions of the ship, there's some discussion about the heavy armour, strong shields and ample point defence options, which suggests that a well-crewed Javelin could operate in a tank kind of role, soaking up damage and staying in the fight. The relatively large cargo bay also makes an interesting use case for transporting high value or potentially volatile cargo in a fairly well defended manner. And the Javelin could also be a highly effective escort ship, almost as the ultimate deterrent for would-be nefarious characters. Ultimately, in my mind, the Javelin could be the pinnacle of group gameplay, offering a significant group of players the opportunity to work together to do something special, and that's what's so exciting about the ship. The Star Citizen equivalent of a WoW raid, something that requires coordination and teamwork, but pays off with a rewarding experience for those willing to invest the time and effort to bring all of that together. It's no secret that the Javelin looks set to feature prominently in the Squadron 42 campaign, and could be a very interesting platform to set a story aboard. The long rooms and corridors all contributing to give a sense of being on an active duty naval warship, but the single ship-sized hangar bay making whoever is flying off the ship feel incredibly important. Plus, all of the nice story environments like the expansive briefing room likely make a great place for stories to happen. Given the design parameters behind the Javelin, fleet roles are at the core of what the ship does. At a large naval level, like in service with the UEE, much of the role will be as a key escort, screening much larger ships from potential threats, and able to add some firepower with the mix of light and heavy armament. This escort role could translate nicely across to some of the larger cargo ships in the game, for example with the Javelin forming a key defensive asset, able to stay with the high-value target and deter any would-be attackers. For player fleets, the Javelin is more likely to be the centerpiece rather than a screening ship, with a fleet built around the heavy firepower that the Javelin can offer, as well as coordination through the onboard command and control facilities. It's important to note here that my expectation is that the Javelin would operate as the flagship of a fleet of multiple players. In no way am I expecting that a single player would be flying 3 or 4 big ships at the same time. For those of you who are familiar with this channel, you probably know I could go on talking about the Javelin forever. But at the risk of going on for too long, that just about covers this episode of the Drydock. Your thoughts will be very welcome in the comment section, whether about the Javelin or about whether you'd like to see more such videos in the future. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, you might like to do that too, as well as hitting the like button, that is, if you like heavily narrated slideshows talking about naval hardware. Otherwise, and as always, and I certainly mean it if you got this far, thank you for watching.